Hello, Lucas, US Storm Mage here. So today we're going to have an updated guide for the Demonology Warlock for patch 8.0. So the pre-patch came out last week. We had a guide. I posted a guide. Since I've posted that guide, there's been a pretty significant change, which is someone discovered that the Diabolic set from Tomb of Sicarius provides a pretty significant increase in DPS. So the two-piece Shadow Bolt and Demon Wrath have a 20% chance to reset the cooldowns of Call Dreadstalkers. We don't have Demon Wrath, but we certainly have Shadow Bolt. So this gear is going to pump out a lot more Call Dreadstalkers with it than without it. So let's talk about the gear first. I'm using the two-piece TOS set, and I'm using a four-piece Antorus set. On Warcraft logs, I have seen people use two-piece TOS and two-piece Antorus, and then fill in the rest with high item levels. Now our stat weights have changed. It's intellect equals haste. When I do my own sims, my haste barely edges out my intellect. It's so negligible. For me, intellect equals haste, and generally speaking, intellect and haste. So now with intellect having a much more predominant role in 8.0 than it did before the pre-patch, higher item level gear might be better than your lower item levels that have haste on it. You'll have to sim it to see which piece you're getting higher DPS from. But I'm not surprised on the log that I'm seeing two-piece, and then higher item levels. It's not a lot of people, but it is some. It is there. It's something for you to consider. I simmed the highest using my four-piece and the two-piece TOS, so that's what I'm using. While we're talking about gear, Wilfred's Sigil of Superior Summoning is still required for this. It's still required for any demo build. Anytime you can get your Tyrant out, I've gotten it down to a 35-second cooldown in some cases. So you really got to have Wilfred's Sigil of Superior Summoning. Your Dreadstalker and Wild Imps are going to reduce the cooldown of your Demonic Tyrant. Your Demonic Tyrant is going to increase all your current demons' durations by 15 seconds, and all the other ones that you summon out are going to be empowered by 15% while your Tyrant's attacking a target. So it's just the synergy with these two are just amazing. You have to have it. So in our other build, we were using Summon Vile Fiend as part of that synergy. Vile Fiend takes a lesser role now that we're focusing on getting Call Dreadstalkers out. So let's talk about the build. And I'm not going to go in order. I'm going to talk about what's mandatory first, because there are some more choices in this build than there were in the previous build. So the absolute mandatory is in Tier 2 is Demonic Calling, and Tier 6 Inner Demons, whether or not you have Soul of the Netherlord. Soul of the Netherlord gives me a soul conduit. If you don't have this legendary, you're still going to pick up Inner Demons. And then finally, Sacrifice Soul is mandatory. Mandatory Demonic Calling, mandatory Inner Demons, mandatory Sacrifice Souls. So Tier 1, you have a choice between these two. I'm simming the highest with Dreadlash. When your Dreadstalkers charge into battle, their Dreadbite attack now hits all targets within 8 yards and deals 25% more damage. So in this ability, the only thing we really care about in single target is that the Call Dreadstalkers are doing 25% more damage. And now that we've paired this with our two-piece Diabolic set, we're getting more Dreadstalkers out, and they all have 25% increased damage. It's a lot more damage, especially if you're proccing a lot off your two-piece. There still are a lot of people using Demonic Strength. It's still very powerful. Go ahead and sim. In addition to simming, also keep in mind what your play style is, what you think feels the best. They're both very close. My preference is definitely Dreadlash. I think it pairs really nice with the two-piece. Tier 3 is, again, no DPS value. Pick what you want. So Tier 4 gives you the most choice of all the tiers. In the sims that I've run, Summoned Vile Fiend is absolutely doing the most DPS in The Sims. Soul Strike is slightly behind it, but I found in real-world applications on the test dummy and also in Antorus, Soul Strike was giving me more damage, more actual damage, and that's just not one pull. I think I've done the first boss in Antorus about 15 times, and I've tried both, and I'm really getting Soul Strike. Now, from the shadows is simming the lowest for me, and I've not had a lot of success for it. But if you look at Warcraft logs, there are quite a few players that are picking up this talent. So it's definitely worth trying, definitely worth simming. I would, if I were you, I would try all three of these and see, one, what feels the best, and two, what's giving you the most DPS. And use raid bots and sim it, and see which one is giving you the highest DPS, and start there. So that's tier 4. It's the most choice. Tier 5, again, no DPS value, pick up you want. And as we stated, tier 6 and 7, Inner Demons and Sacrifice Soul. The big difference in the rotation from the last video that I posted, it had you using your Demonic Tyrant for every Vile Fiend and every Called Dreadstalker. And that's not going to be the case in this build. In this build, you want to make sure you get your Demonic Tyrant out as much as possible. If you're holding it 8 to 10 seconds every time it's up to wait for Vile Fiend, over the course of a fight, you're going to miss maybe 3, maybe more Tyrants. Because the cooldown on this, I've gotten it, you're going to get it down to about 40 seconds, give or take. And now that you're having more Called Dreadstalkers out, you really want to get that Tyrant out on those Called Dreadstalkers. So you want to be hitting your Tyrant when the CD is up. Obviously, if your Vile Fiend is a second or two, you might, it's probably a good idea to wait. But I'm not waiting 5 seconds. I'm not waiting 8 seconds. I'm casting this when this cooldown is pretty much available. In the opener, I'm doing 4 seconds of a countdown timer. We're hitting our Potion of Prolonged Power. At 3 seconds, we're going into Demon Bolt. Then I'm doing Called Dreadstalkers into a Hand of Gul'dan. If my Soul Conduit is procced or my Demonic Calling procced, I can go into a Vile Fiend. If not, we'll do Shadow Bolt, Vile Fiend, Tyrant, and then we'll just do our rotation of Called Dreadstalkers on cooldown, or when you get a proc from your 2-piece. That's the priority over your Hand of Gul'dan. And then when Dreadstalkers isn't available, when you've built up 3 Soul Shards, you're doing Hand of Gul'dan. We're building Soul Shards with Shadow Bolt and with Demon Bolt. Remember, your 2-piece is only going to proc off your Shadow Bolt. It's not going to proc off your Demon Bolt. Alright, so let's take a look at the rotation. At 4 seconds pot, at 3 seconds Demon Bolt, into a Hand of Gul'dan, Shadow Bolt, Vile Fiend, Tyrant. And now we're going to sham Shadow Bolt. See, we already got a proc of Called Dreadstalkers. We got another proc of Dreadstalkers. Another proc. A lot of Dreadstalkers. So now we have a lot of Demon Bolt procs here. And remember, you're not going to get your 2-piece procking off of this. But you still want to get all these guys out. Now here's our Tyrant. Let's get him out. Get our Vile Fiend. And that's it, guys. I mean, this is the whole rotation. Get our Tyrant out. Alright. So, I'm going to go over the rotation again, and we're going to use Soul Strike instead. I have to run away from the boss because my inner souls, the passive imps it spawns, I have no control. I have no control over their attack. You can't turn them off. So as long as I stay near the boss, the inner demon imps are gonna attack. All right, let's go back, and then we'll do Soul Strike. Now, the important thing to remember with Soul Strike is that it's only a 10-second cooldown. So if you're not hitting this when the cooldown is up and you're waiting 15, 20 seconds, whatever, it's a DPS loss. So only use this if you can. Be diligent to make sure you are using it appropriately, that you're using it off cooldown. All right. Rotation's the same. There's no change. It's just you're not going to have your Vile Fiend, and you're going to have Soul Strike. All right. You pre-pot at 4, Demon Bolt at 3, into a Cold Dreadstalkers, into I'm going to get an extra Tyrant out of there. Alright, Cold Dreadstalkers is procced. And you can see my Weakaura is here when Soul Strike is available. So you can see how quickly I'm using it. We're going to use that over the Demon Bolt proc. And that's it. The rotation is the same. Alright, that's it. So the other thing I want to talk about real quickly before we end this is the actual gear. I'm Mythic geared. So if you're not Mythic geared, let's say your lock is an alt and your gear score is really low, the 4-piece Diabolic set is a lot of fun. When you cast Cold Dreadstalkers, you gain a 10% haste for 5 seconds. And I have to tell you, it was so fun to do. You're almost shard capped the entire time. If you're higher geared, it's not worth taking the 4-piece because the item level increase from your Antor's gear is going to out DPS the 4-piece TOS. But if you're not geared, consider using the 4-piece because it's a lot of fun, and you'll do more damage at lower level gear. If you have lower level gear, you're gonna do better with that 4-piece. That was the only mention. But if you're, I would imagine, heroic geared or higher Antorus, you're not going to benefit. But of course, you know what I'm going to say. Go ahead and sim. I'm going to put the description down to the Weakaura. If you grabbed my last Weakaura, grab this one, upload it. I've added some more spells to the cooldown icons. I've repositioned some of them to make them a little easier to see. It's worth picking up the new one. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the video. Check back if there's any more changes, any more updates. If anybody else finds any other tricks to increase the DPS, I'll post another video about it. I hope you liked this demo video. Feel free to comment and like, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks.